Hello and welcome to the SBK Betting Podcast. I'm Adam Baylis, filling in this week for Jess Stafford, who's away at Glastonbury, enjoying the likes of Coldplay and Shania Twain. But fear not, I'm joined by the usual cast of experts, Ross the scientist, Millar, and Tom, that don't impress me much, Collins. And if you don't get those musical references, it's going to be a long half an hour. How are you both?
Yeah, I'm good. I was better before you gave me that nickname, though it is an absolute banger. I won't treat everyone to singing it, but I do prefer a bit of Shania over Coldplay, I have to say.
Oh yeah, I'd be with that. And anyone that knows me from school days knows that science was definitely not a subject I excelled in. But also, are we sure Jess is at Glastonbury? Because the last time I heard reports of her, she was walking down Ascot High Street, swinging from a bottle of champagne, thinking we're going to win the Melbourne Cup. So are we certain that it's Glastonbury and not just a 7-day celebration?
It's highly likely, although we did get some photographic evidence about 20 minutes ago. So Ascot, Glastonbury via Ascot, I think, is probably the way. And that's a nice segue, hey, because we should spend a bit of time just talking about Royal Ascot, what a week it was. And I'm quite keen just to get both of your thoughts on perhaps a couple of horses that you're taking out of the week. Ross, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'd touch on the 2-year-olds because that's perhaps what I cover a bit more. I thought the Colts were a pretty moderate bunch. I think Shareholder would have won the Coventry if he'd been in that. He won the Norfolk. I don't think we've seen a 2,000 guineas winner at Royal Ascot. 1,000 guineas winner, I think we probably have seen one, whether it's the English or the Irish, because they're both going to be Aidan O'Brien horses. Fairy Godmother, who just, the more you watch it, the more incredible it is that she switched 3 times and shot home in a matter of strides. And then Bedtime Story, who was the absolute opposite, had the race in control from pretty much flagfall in the Chesham. I would be with Fairy Godmother over Bedtime Story. I just think speed is a really potent weapon along with acceleration, which she had. But what I would say is I was really close to backing Fairy Godmother at a bigger price. She lengthened after Bedtime Story ran. But Aidan O'Brien this year spoke about his Guineas horses and he trained the 2-year-olds hard and therefore had to give them more time. It does seem like Breeders' Cup end of season targets are perhaps taking a bit more preference in the Coolmore Ballydor setup these days. So I would perhaps wait and see how he trains them for the rest of the year, how long into the autumn he runs them. If one or other didn't have a late autumn campaign, I would perhaps then be interested in backing that one for the 1,000 guineas. That would be my angle. In terms of other eye catchers, I thought Carry the One ran an absolute cracker in the Buckingham Palace. Up the stand side rail under Pat Dobbs, had no luck whatsoever. And when the gaps did open, he flew home into third. Stays on an unchanged mark of 101. He won at Newmarket off a mark of 99 before that. Again, a little bit luckless in running. The horse that was third on that occasion ran pretty well in the Buckingham Palace, finished 6th. In between those two was Gorak. Now, he was disappointing in the Buckingham Palace, finished 12th, but he was on the far side rail. He was away from the pace, not well drawn. He's 16-1 for the Bunbury Cup at Newmarket, July the 13th, I think it is. Thought that was an interesting angle. And then the other one I mentioned on the preview pod was Holloway Boy. Really luckless run. But he's an Ascot horse. He's a good to firm horse. He's a frustrating horse. Wouldn't necessarily have him as a tracker horse. I'd probably wait to see him pop back up at Ascot on good to firm ground in a mile handicap.
Thank you. I have to ask on Bedtime Story, Ross, when a horse like that goes and bolts up in a sort of Frankel-esque fashion by 9-10 lengths, does it just make you question the form a bit, or do we just think that she could be a freak?
She could be a freak, but I wrote this week I would be far more confident that the Albany form is going to hold up than the Chesham form. The Chesham can be a bit of a something and nothing race. If you think Holloway Boy, for example, won it 2 years ago as it was, that Chesham didn't really work out all that well. She could just be a freak against slow horses. She could be a freak against better than average horses. I would lean towards the former. I think it's probably a slightly subpar addition, but she was wickedly impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, time will tell. TC, what have you got for us coming out of Ascot?
Yeah, I'm going to give you 3. Ross has already talked about the 2-year-old fillies there, so I'll mention a couple of 2-year-old colts, albeit I don't think the Coventry was a great race. I think there'll be plenty of subsequent winners just because of the way it developed. Lots of jockeys got moving too soon, as I mentioned in the preview pods, and therefore a couple of horses weren't really able to show their best performance on the day. They were ridden inefficiently. And the 2 that really stand out to me are Coward of the County, who finished 7th, and Yarn Moby there, who finished 18th. Now, especially in the case of the latter, because he finished so far down the field, I think lots of people will overlook him and think he was maybe very disappointing or overrated at Ascot. However, I think none of that. The horse shaped brilliantly in the middle part of the race between 4 furlongs and 2 furlongs. So there's a 2 furlong split there. Yarmoby there actually recorded 11.5 sectionals in both of those splits. He just moved too soon into the race and he travelled like a dream to that point, then just got tired. So I think you can definitely mark him up. Coward of the County, slightly different, but also the same. He was in the middle of the track along with Yarmoby there, moved a little bit too soon. Now, he did stay in the latter stages. The reason I'd follow him moving forward is that I think he'd be better over longer trips, maybe a mile. We'll see the best of him. And one other, which could be overlooked, and that's Gaspar de Lemos, who finished 5th in the King George V Stakes. Now, this is a horse that I would have tipped actually going into Ascot if there was rain around, but the ground was too quick for him. Nevertheless, he ran an absolute cracker. He was up with the pace from the outset. If you go onto attheraces.com and view their sectional timings, the early part of that race was ridiculously fast. Big field, obviously going around the round course, so trying to get into a nice position. Yet he was super prominent. All the other horses that were prominent in the early stages faded back through the pack. He plugged on well for 5th. I think Gaspar de Lemos could be an absolute tool over a mile 6 furlongs later in the year, maybe even 2 miles next season.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I should flag actually, on the day we saw a bit of kind of pretty sharp money for Gaspar de Lemos each way. So listen, they do clearly think it could be pretty interesting going forward. So a couple there to follow. Right, thank you both. That's Royal Ascot out the way, a promise for the final time in 2024. We'll move on to this Saturday's action, headlined by certainly in the UK, headlined by the Northumberland Plate. And it's a pretty simple question to you both. Has Sir Mark got this wrapped up? We'll start with you, TC.
Yeah, maybe. Trooper Bisdee's in fantastic form at the moment. Won decisively just 6 days ago. This horse could be going from lowly heights of that official handicap rating when he first went into handicaps to now winning the Northumberland Plate. It wouldn't surprise me, and obviously Holly Doyle being on board is a big tick in the box. Holly's got a great chance in both the Plate and the Vars, but more to come on that later. It's a tough race though, isn't it, to default onto the favourite, despite the fact he's got such an enticing profile. Now, saying that, favourites have won 4 of the last 10 editions. So, it doesn't always become a race where you have to look way outside the box. The average price in the last 10 years is around 10 to 1, but we have had a 33 to 1 in that time. So that boosted the average price. I wouldn't be surprised if Trooper Bisdee won. I'm going to look slightly elsewhere for a little bit more value, and that's going to be One Smooth Operator. Now, I think a key factor in defining who I'm going to tip in this race is due to the draw. If you look back at the last 7 runnings of this race, 6 of those winners have come from stall 11 or higher. There's a very short run to the first turn at Newcastle. And as we saw at Royal Ascot for much of the week on the round course, if you're drawn high and out a bit further, a bit wider on the track, you're able to move across into the position you want to be in. If you're drawn inside, the break determines what position you're going to get. And therefore, a wider draw is slightly more ideal. And therefore, I wanted a horse at double figure price in the Northumberland Plate. One Smooth Operator has that. Now, his strike rate isn't great. He's just 3 from 33, and that's probably not a record that many people will look at and go, yeah, this horse is one I want to back in a wide open and competitive handicap like this. But Brian Ellison, we know, targets horses at this event. He's usually run over 1 mile 2, 1 mile 4 furlongs, has become something of a course specialist at Newcastle, but he's had very limited tries at this 2 mile, half a furlong trip, and I think that's the key here. He ran very well at the turn of the year in January when he stayed on nicely from way back in the pack. Tender handling is how I describe that ride. And then last time at Southwell, I thought he shaped well behind Pridwin, who, yes, didn't really frank the form at Royal Ascot, but was facing far better opposition. So I don't think you can read too much into that. Around 8 to 1, I'd be disappointed if One Smooth Operator wasn't in the first 3 or 4.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I was going to ask you about the impact of the draw. I quite liked Jesse Harrington's Yashin, but stall 1, just forget about it. I think they're probably no chance. Ross, give us your thoughts.
I just wonder whether the favourite for Sir Mark has just had 1 win too many. Interviewed during Royal Ascot week, and he said about winning these handicaps and running up sequences is very hard to do, and 2 is possible, 3 becomes very difficult. He is a short price in a competitive race. I liked True Legend, his other horse. I think he's perhaps just peaking at the right time. I thought he was absolutely luckless at Goodwood last time. Stayed on really powerfully behind Tides of War, who been bang out of form, but was very well handicapped on some of his vintage form going back a couple of years. I thought that was a good run. He'll improve for the extra 2 furlongs. His only all-weather win came at Newcastle. I think that's a positive. Little bit, concerned about Kieran Fallon taking over. A stat attack for you. Kieran Fallon's never ridden a loser for Sir Mark because he's never ridden for him. I thought that was quite surprising as a jockey booking. Surely there'd have been a rider you'd have gone to. And I just sometimes worry with Kieran that he can be a little bit tactically naive in some of these big field handicaps. I hope that doesn't play out. But I thought 16-1 with SBK was a very decent price. And then a horse that I very nearly put up, we had to do an anti-post piece 2 or 3 weeks back, a horse called Golden Flame, who's trained by Deborah Faulkner. Now, you remember, she had Golden Rules, who was a luckless second last year under Ossian Murphy. This horse has got a very similar profile. Golden Rules was brought out of the John Gosden yard, had 600 days off, was bought injured out of the sales, had 600 days off, came back, bolted up at Kempton, went off a fairly short price for this. Golden Flame was bought out of the Johnston's yard. He's had 600 plus days off. And I saw him entered, and I know Tom Faulkner, who's Deborah's son, assistant trainer, from a point-to-point days. I got in touch with him. I said, are you going to give this horse a prep run? Because if they had, I would have backed him anti-post. He said, no, he's fit and well. We're going to keep him back and go straight to the Northumberland Plate. He's working really well. Ossian Murphy met them in Lambourne in the middle of the week. I think they were fully intending on, well, actually in the middle of Ascot week, they were fully intending on him riding. He's obviously had to go elsewhere. Duran Fentiman is perhaps, not the vintage name, but perfectly capable. This horse is pretty well handicapped on his best form. He won off a mark of 91. His penultimate start for the Johnstons, he was second off a mark of 90 behind Wings of Wise Eagle, who's an Adam Nicol horse. You remember SBK did a feature with. It was a horse very cheaply bought, went right through the ranks in staying races. Wise Eagle was off a mark of 94 on that occasion. He's now rated 107. I thought Golden Flame ran pretty well in that race. He'll stay this trip. 50-1 with SBK, I thought, wasn't the worst price. And you just cannot underestimate the Falconers. They've got phenomenal facilities. They've got a swimming pool. They've got all the gadgets. They're a small yard, but they do a lot of rehab work for other trainers. So this horse will have had everything thrown at him, and it might just be a little bit too big for just the fact that connections are fairly small.
Big price there from Ross Millar. Golden Flame, 50-1 with SBK. I dare say Duran Fentiman's on board. It's got a super low racing weight there, 8.3. There wouldn't be many that can get down to that. So that's possibly why he's on board. TC, can I just get a quick line for you from the other Brian Ellison runner, top weight Tashcan? Obviously, arguably the class horse in the race, and it's interesting, obviously, that Ben Robertson's chosen to ride him.
Yeah, it's very interesting. He's definitely a player as well. If he shows his A game, then he could turn up and win. We've seen in the past though that horses off top weight, I wouldn't say they struggle, but they find it hard to win Northumberland Plate. I'm thinking Trushan obviously ran great, but plenty of the others off top weight tend to just kind of fall a little bit below the top level. I presume that's generally because so many of these horses have been targeted at the Northumberland Plate, whereas some of those who run off top weight could have been targeted elsewhere and then moved to this race. But I certainly wouldn't be writing him off. Anything that Brian sends to this race has to have a major chance. Yeah,
100%. Right, just to wrap up those selections for the Northumberland Plate then, Mr. Tom Collins is with Brian Ellison's One Smooth Operator, available to back around 12-1 with SBK, and Ross Millar's with True Legend and Golden Flame, who's a big price. I should also flag that SBK have a 25% winnings boost on that race. So that means that you can get 25% extra winnings on any runner in the race. Max stakes do apply, T's and C's do apply. So please check for that in the app. Right, chaps, a busy Saturday of racing elsewhere. Some good action, obviously, on the July course in the Criterion Stakes. Noble Dynasty heads the market there. You'll remember he pretty convincingly beat Buckingham Palace Stakes winner English Oak last time out, which obviously bodes well for him going in again. And then over at the Curragh, there's the Pretty Polly, strong raiding party there, headed by Rafe Beckett's Blue Stocking, alongside Emily Upjohn. Beyond your naps and next best, is there anything else you want to talk about on Saturday?
No jumps racing, so I'm having a quiet one, just a nap and the next best for me, Adam.
Copy that. TC, anything for you?
Not really. There's a couple of first-time starters that are interesting, but I'm going to wait to see the price before I put their names out there. I anticipate with the July course being in action now at Newmarket, that Charlie Appleby and Godolphin are going to have a good day, despite the fact I'm actually going to tip against them with my next best. So maybe look at the undercard at Newmarket and play a couple of Godolphins in accumulators or multiples, whatever types you prefer. But I'll keep my powder dry at this stage.
Copy that. Right, let's move on to Sunday then, and the Irish Derby, which is arguably the headline attraction this weekend. You've got the second and third from Epsom doing battle Ambiente friendly versus Los Angeles. Is it just a 2-horse race, guys, or is there something else here lurking? Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a 2-horse race, and I think on bearability, I find it hard to think that Los Angeles is going to turn that Epsom form round with ambient friendly. I thought it was a very difficult race to have a view in at the top of the market, because Aidan O'Brien's going to run 3 or 4. I think team tactics will come into it. I think they'll try and set a very strong pace to suit Los Angeles. And there is a chance that Ambient Friendly could just meet with a little bit of trouble in running if they can get some of their lesser horses around him. But on the flip side of that, I didn't like Los Angeles at all, how he boiled over at Epsom. I think that's a big negative. Yes, he hasn't got to travel this time. That might well just help him. And obviously Epsom is, plenty of fanfare. They've got to get down to the start. It's a little bit harder. So probably if I was going to have a win bet, I would wait and see how Los Angeles was getting down to the start. If he gets down to the start and he's not boiled up, I would be with him. If he gets boiled up and there's 8 runners, and it might just be a nightmare and be 7, I think Sunway for David Menuisier has got a chance. It all went wrong in France last time, and then when he did get the gaps, he just looked to lack a little bit of speed over that mile and a quarter. Much has been made of him not wanting this sort of ground, but he won at Sandown on his debut on good ground over 7 furlongs and looked quick enough there. I think the extra 2 furlongs will suit him. If there's 8 runners and he's double figure price, he'd be my play.
Okay, TC, agree, disagree?
I don't disagree, but I think Sunway definitely has to improve a touch. As Ross said, though, 8 runners would be the crucial number here. We don't know at this stage of recording on Thursday what the final field is going to be. So I think if you're looking each way, you definitely want to see that brilliant number of 8 runners. Much like Ross, I agree that it's probably going to be a match between the top 2. If you look down the rest of the field, the likes of Matsuri probably needs to improve. Sunway probably needs to improve a little bit if they're going to beat Ambiente Friendly and Los Angeles. And I agree that it's probably not the most enticing race and hard to have an opinion, a strong enough opinion to bet a horse at a short price like the 2 jollies are. However, Ambiente Friendly's quickly developed into this really nice horse, hasn't he? With victories at Lingfield and Epsom. Now, what combines Lingfield and Epsom? What makes them similar? They're a downhill, left-handed, unique track. Not all horses handle Lingfield. Not all horses handle Epsom. Now they're going to the Curragh. More conventional, right-handed, a track that may suit Los Angeles far better than Ambiente Friendly. And with, as Ross said, the added bonus of having front runners, pace setters in there from the O'Brien team, and potentially team tactics, I just think shifts it in the favour of Los Angeles, especially given he's had less experience as well. Ambiente Friendly needs to prove that he's as good a horse on a track like this as he is on a left-handed downhill track, whereas Los Angeles has already proven he's an out-and-out galloper who probably wants more of a stamina test and, extra distance, maybe a mile 6, looking towards the St. Ledger. I prefer Los Angeles. I'm quite surprised he's not the favourite. Do I want to have a bet in the race? Absolutely not. 13-8 doesn't entice me, but I wouldn't be surprised if the market shifted his way coming towards the off. Also, why has Callum Shepherd not got the ride? What's going on here, guys?
More on that later on when we get to Napson next best. But I totally agree with you, TC. I think we might well see a bit of a flip-flop in the market here, and Los Angeles may well go off favourite. But it's going to be an interesting contest either way. I actually think it's got quite a nice shape to the race, and anyone bashing it, I think probably needs to take a long hard look at themselves, because it's a decent enough contest. Right, it's probably time to look at the Napson next best, isn't it? Ross, do you want to take us away?
Yes, my nap comes at Newmarket, and I was really disappointed there was no jumps card, because George is one of the background staff last podcast today, and I know he loves when I do jumps tips through the middle of the summer, but there was nothing for me to go at, so I've had to behave myself, go on the flat. The nap is in the 2:15 from Newmarket, probably the most impressive filly I've seen this year away from Royal Ascot. Tales of the heart for Rafe Beckett. She won at Kempton despite getting a whole lot wrong. She did not cope around the bend at Kempton over 6 furlongs. Flew home in what I think was a pretty decent contest. She stays well. She's got loads of gears. She's a sister to Curragh, who was a really good horse over 5 furlongs. She will have learned loads from that. I thought it was notable that Ross O'Ryan was really quite impressed with her when he got off her there. He can't ride her here. William Buick's honour. That's no downgrade in my opinion. I think this straight track will suit her far better. I think she'll take a step forward, stiff finish, suit her well. So Tales of the Heart is the nap in the 2:15. And then for my next best, I am going to the Curragh for the Pretty Polly. I'm fully with Blue Stocking. I'm just not sure that Emily Upjohn is quite what she was. I know they cited lack of race fitness in a very weak Coronation Stakes last time out, where she was beaten 10 lengths in fourth. But to me, she just looked to lack zip. And I think they feel that as well. Her last 3 runs have been over a mile 4. She drops back to a mile 2 here. I'm not sure that's going to suit her. Whereas conversely, they've been trying Blue Stocking over a mile and 4. They dropped her back to a mile 2 last time at York, and she was wickedly impressive. Absolutely bolted up. I think they might have found the key to her. Ross Orion goes over for the ride. I think Blue Stocking will take all the beating in the 3:30, the Pretty Polly Stakes.
Really, really interesting stuff there. TC?
Yeah, my nap's going to come in the Northumberland Vase, the 2:35 at Newcastle, the consolation race for the plate. And it's going to be very unoriginal. Alphonse Legrand, who's currently 11-4 with SBK, which I think is a pretty fair price, actually. We've got a smallish field for the Vase this year, which is disappointing, but also a big positive for Alphonse Legrand's chance. He would have been favourite for the plate itself if he managed to get into that race, but unfortunately, due to his rating of 81, he was forced to run in the consolation, much like what happened at Chester last month, where he was forced to run in the Chester Plate instead of the Cup and went on to win that in emphatic fashion off a mark of 73. William Buick didn't even have to ask him for anything. The whip wasn't used once. It was just hands and heels all the way to the line for a comfortable success over a stablemate. I think it's going to be very similar here. All the way to the line, hands and heels, comfortable success over a stablemate with Belgo Prince back in second. He runs off a mark of 81, which, if you're looking back at all his all-weather efforts in the past, you're probably thinking that's a bit lofty. However, the way he won at Dundalk on his penultimate outing and the success at Chester last time, this horse is just a typical Tony Martin plot job. And albeit Tony's name's not next to his on the race card, I anticipate Alphonse Legrand to take a strong hand in this race and probably win at a shortish price. The next best is at Newmarket in the 4:35, and it's Candle of Dubai for Charlie Johnson and Oisin Murphy. Now, I went back and watched the podcast from May the 23rd, and I put this filly up at Goodwood, and I really fancied her that day. She went off around 4-1. Thought she had a great chance on just a second career outing. She's a big, striding daughter of Zoffany, an absolute unit, wants a trip. And she ran second, bumped into a nice horse of Tom Ward's, who subsequently disappointed, but is very talented in Crystal Flyer. Candle of Dubai then ran subsequently at Chelmsford, absolutely hacked up by 2.5 lengths. I think the July course at Newmarket will be perfect for her. Uphill run to the finish is definitely up her alley. Now she steps up to 1 mile 4 furlongs. Again, a huge tick in the box. She looks to me like a proper Glorious Goodwood 3-year-old for the Johnstons, and we know how good those types are with this training operation. So hopefully she can get the job done off a pretty lenient mark, in my opinion, of 81. She runs in the 4:35 at Newmarket.
Love it. Yeah, I have to say, I thought that Alphonse Legrand just shaped like a real plot job for no longer Tony Martin. I'm sure it goes in again. So to summarise, from Mr. Tom Collins, we've got Alphonse Legrand in the 2:35 at Newcastle as his nap, Candle of Dubai in the 4:35 at Newmarket as his next best. And then from Ross Millar, we've got Tales of the Heart for Rafe Beckett in the 2:15 at Newmarket. And again, sticking with Mr. Rafe Beckett over the Irish Sea at the Curragh in the 3:30 for Blue Stocking. Now, I did say earlier on, Callum Shepherd, there's a narrative here. Yes, he's not ambient friendly, but I think he might have a winner in the first at Newcastle, the 1 o'clock. He rides Wodow for Jamie Osborne off a mark of 100. This was a non-runner from the Wokingham Royal Ascot last week. Self-cert, raise the eyebrow there. But listen, good firm ground, wouldn't have suited at all. On the all-weather today, got some pretty decent form actually behind some interesting horses when trained by Donica O'Brien. Raced at Chantilly, got within a length and a half of Tenebrism, a length and a half of Marshman last season as well. Been gelded, first time up, goes well fresh. I think this is really, really interesting, and I think Newcastle will suit. So 16-1 each way with SBK makes plenty of appeal. Right, a bit of housekeeping. I should remind all new SBK users get £30 in free bets when you sign up for the first time and you bet £10. T's and C's do apply, 18 plus and over. And as Ross mentioned, this is producer George's last ever podcast. So a round of applause, whether virtually or at home for him. It's been a pleasure working with the great man. Jess Stafford will be back next week, I think, if she survives Glastonbury or perhaps Royal Ascot High Street. And we look forward to seeing you then. As always, please like and subscribe and keep on listening. Thanks again.